think it was branded as Future Look. And then I got really busy for 4 months, you know, in preparation for the virtual premiere. At the beginning, before all this, we were going to do an in-person premiere event in Boston. And then obviously with the world changing, that changed to a digital event. So it's been a really interesting, you know, evolution and just learning as we go about, you know, how to put together what we hope will be, you know, a pretty comprehensive, successful digital event tomorrow. So starting at zero, I've been working with the Salzance Charitable Foundation, which is dedicated to putting a dent in poverty. And they've decided that early education is the vehicle that they want to use to do that. And that's where they've really been focused with their investments. And so they came upon the idea of wanting to create a film several years ago. And we have been traveling around the country and conducting interviews, including visiting Laura Jana, who's also on the call. She's the author of The Toddler Brain, which is a really interesting book looking at the importance of the early years for developing key life and entrepreneurial skills. So you should all check that out. But she's featured in our documentary, Starting at Zero, Reimagining Education in America. And tomorrow, you know, after 3 years in production, we're offering a free and public virtual premiere with screenings at 1:30 and 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So would love to have you all there. And even if you can't join, I encourage you to RSVP because the film will be made available for 24 hours after that, something we're not advertising. But Laura, do you want to jump in and say hi and introduce yourself? It's special to have an actual star from the film. I'm just, you know, in the background here.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's great to join you too, Willa. But let me first say that Willa doesn't quite do herself justice on this one because for my background, I am a pediatrician by training, but really I've served as Director of Innovation in Public Health. I now have a faculty appointment at Penn State in Prevention Research. And I really function at the intersect between health and education, making the case that they're sort of intertwined. The other case that I made that people thought I was a bit crazy when I made it, but thankfully Willa and the Salzance team came along, was that I made the case that the skills that everyone agrees upon, whether we're talking about K-12, higher ed, workforce, entrepreneurship, but those 21st century skills that are so critically important, and I always have my laundry list: communication, collaboration, teamwork, adaptability, resilience, grit, perseverance. I mean, everybody nods and they know the list. All have their foundational development in the first 5 years. And even beyond that, we now have the neuroscience to back it up. So as I was going about my business, making the case, the intersect between health and education, that there's this link to 21st century skills in the business jobs workforce discussion, along came Willa and the Salzance team. And so I was honored to participate in this because for framing for you, the hit parade of people involved in Starting at Zero, I have not seen anything like it in the early childhood space. And I mean, I'm a spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics. I've been involved in this sort of education side of this for at least a decade. And it's the who's who of the evidence base across sectors, all focusing on not just early childhood, but how we set a strong foundation for all the other elements of education. So hopefully people will get to join us. The other thing that's very exciting that Willa didn't get to emphasize is not only is it a lot of talk and kind of bringing people up to speed on what we now know about the first 5 years, but it goes beyond that because it's policymakers and governors and heads of foundations and business leaders and everyone. And I always describe it as a tsunami of interest in laying the foundation for not just the rest of the education continuum and jobs workforce, but also healthy outcomes and equity and all those other things that everyone cares about. So I'll stop there, but I am just honored to be a part of the film. And I'm also very honored to get to join this conversation because wearing my other hat, I spend a whole lot of time, especially after the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with their recommendations for school attendance, but talking about what to do in this, you know, sort of digital online pandemic era that we're all facing with education.
Well, Laura couldn't have said it any better. So, you know, we hope you join us tomorrow, the full event. There's a 30-minute waiting room if you arrive early, but then the full event is an hour and a half, and there are a couple of panel discussions leading into and after the film in the 63-minute film. And Laura is both in the film as well as a panelist, and it's really kind of star-studded cast of panelists as well. So you're all welcome. We'll share links with you. And thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Willa and Laura. for coming and sharing kind of this amazing kind of story that you guys are telling. And I know that that's been kind of years and years of work traveling around the country. Yeah, I'm totally looking forward to it. So we put a link down in chat, and we're really honored to kind of have you be a part of the conversation as well. And this is something that we have been kind of doing as a community, is that kind of as a panelist are having the conversation. Generally, we've been pretty active in chat, which is great. And I know that there's a lot of experts kind of in the room, and I'm super excited for today's kind of conversation. And there's almost kind of, oftentimes that's, I won't say two conversations, but a very broad single conversation that happens both in video and also in chat. So definitely can welcome you guys to kind of open chat up and make sure that as a lot of these links or things are being shared, that that you're aware that that you're aware that it's happening. So kind of with that said, I would like to kind of introduce my friend Steve Cronin. And we were just talking about how long we have known each other. So I went to RISD in Rhode Island. And Steve is a prominent kind of business leader here in Rhode Island. And when I met him 13 years ago, he was the CEO of a printing company that was really kind of forward thinking, and everyone thought that the printing business was dying. Steve had some just fantastic ideas around kind of like not just how to save the business, but just ideas of where kind of marketing kind of was going. And it always centered around kind of just relationships. And I'm so grateful to have built a great relationship with him in the last kind of 13 years. And one of the things that I've gotten involved with Steve, and I'm not going to tell the full story, I'm going to let him tell the story, is it's him kind of volunteering at Hope High School for the last 17 years, doing something that is just remarkable, and kind of essentially teaching kind of kids kind of leadership skills at a very young age, and helping propel them into college, and provide opportunities. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to pass it off to kind of Steve to introduce himself and then introduce the panel. Steve is going to be kind of helping facilitate our conversation today. So thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. And thanks for everybody coming today. Just to preface my remarks, we have three very interesting educators, Victoria, Kathy, and Sam, from three different spaces in education, but I'm really counting on everybody else getting involved in this conversation. I, for one, I think can learn a lot from everybody who's on this call today. We're in a very unique time, and I think some of the things that you may be experiencing and observing, I think can help me with my work at Hope High School. As Tino said, business person, I developed a life skills program. I built a website that I'd encourage you all to take a look at. It's called hopelifeskills.com. And if you could take a look at that, I've been writing a blog for the last 4 years, summarizing my class, posting homework assignments. So if you see anything that I could be doing better, or just questioning some of the things I'm presently doing, I'd love to hear it. I'd like to start by speaking directly now to our three guests. Victoria, Kathy, and Sam. I first want to commend Kathy for being awake at 10:30, almost 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. in Croatia. Kathy, I'd be asleep right now, so I really commend you for your spirit and strength, so thank you very much. I'd like to start by asking each one, Victoria, Sam, and Kathy, to introduce themselves, who they are, name of their school, whether it's public or private, student demographic, what their curriculum focus is, and what their role is in the school. So Victoria, if I could start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Stephen. My name is Victoria Scotti. I am the student leadership coordinator at a top international school here in Los Angeles. We are a private middle and high school. We also have an elementary, but they're on a different campus. So our demographic is extremely broad and worldly. We have more than 39 languages are spoken on our campus. We have students representing more than 60 nationalities. And, that creates a really interesting learning environment We focus on a rigorous bilingual education, rigorous bilingual curriculum, and we really place a strong emphasis on, cultural differences and creating students that are able to look at problems from multiple worldviews and things like that. So I also am a student myself. I am a master's student at CSUN, California State University, Northridge here, finishing up my master's degree in anthropology. So this has been a unique time for me with the COVID pandemic to get to experience being on kind of both sides of the spectrum here as an educator and as a student as well.
Victoria, thank you very much. Kathy, what about you?
Great. Yes. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us this evening. It's evening my time, as you heard. So I am Kathy Stetson, and I am the Executive Director for the Central and Eastern European Schools Association. We go by the name CESA. And basically we work with US embassy schools in Eastern Europe. So my territory is from Helsinki to Istanbul, and from Prague and Vienna out to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. So I have a wide variety of schools. Generally, we have one school in every country where there is either an embassy or a consulate. And so our schools are, I think our smallest school has about 3 or 4 kids because it's a very small place. And we have, like our school in Prague is, 1,200, and Warsaw, they're quite large. And then my location is Zagreb, Croatia is where I locate. And our school has about 250 kids. So our schools are predominantly, as I said, they work with embassy children around the world. And we have not only US embassy kids, but other embassies in those cities where we have our schools join us. So we have very international, intercultural kinds of students. And we serve kids from pre-K to 12. And our curriculum predominantly is IB through most of our schools, as well as we do, just basically it's focused on international. They're basically private schools. So if you can imagine, we're funded by some funding from the US government, but they are private independent schools. And my role is really to provide professional development and support for the schools. And right now during the COVID times here, we have been offering opportunities like this on a weekly basis for our directors. And we pride ourselves on collaboration. So that's probably enough for now.
Kathy, I didn't understand what IB meant. You made that reference when we talked.
International Baccalaureate, which is an education program, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but our schools are, we do standards-based curriculum in most of them, and with a project-based curriculum under the IB, the International Baccalaureate program.
I imagine there are some differences in the curriculum in each country, I would assume, some slight differences, I would assume.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Kathy, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sam, Providence, Rhode Island.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Jean-Baptiste, and I am an 11th grade advisor at the Met School, the Metropolitan Regional Career and Technical Center here in Providence, Rhode Island. I've been here for about 7 years, or this is going to be my 7 years, and I've been in education for 10. At the Met, we believe in connecting students to real-world learning experiences in and outside of the classroom. And 2 days out of the week, our students are engaging in with professionals out in careers in their interest. And the other 3 days, we're working with them to work on projects in their interest. Right from the beginning, we have our freshman students create resumes and cover letters, and we teach them professionalism, how to perform in interviews, how to ask good questions, how to work on project. We also have we base our curriculum on the project-based model, and so we teach them how to create timelines, to create proposals, and how to follow those timelines to hopefully a great ending. And so our demographic is predominantly Hispanic and African American, here in the neighborhood of South Side, South Providence, an area where I grew up in. And so it's a pleasure for me to kind of give back to the community and serve in the community that I grew up in. We also have, in Providence, we have two campuses in Providence, and then we have a campus in Newport. And our Newport campus serves more affluent community, predominantly white community there.
Sam, you are a public charter school, is that correct?
Yes. Yes, we are.
And if I understand your curriculum correctly, this is really workforce readiness. Is that I know it's a simple way, but is that kind of summarize just what your focus is in school?
Well, I would say, and first, actually, to answer your question, we are not a charter school, but we are state-owned, and so there is a distinction there. But as far as how we prepare our students are ranging from students who are going to be in more technical jobs to students that are going to college. We work on a 4-year basis. So I take in students from freshman year and I work with them until they graduate. And I am primarily the facilitator of their experiences and their opportunities. I also take them to interviews. And but in my first class that I graduated with, I had students that were starting businesses, students that got scholarships to Temple University, to our local university, University of Rhode Island. We have kind of across the gamut.
That's great. Sam, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let me start with my first question to the three of you. And that question is, how has COVID affected your plans for this coming school year? Everything from safety measures, access to technology, all the things that I know all schools are discussing right now. And I'll start back at the top with you, Victoria, if that's okay. How is it affecting what's going on in your school right now?
Well, so actually, kind of fortuitously, last year we had rolled out a pilot program, pre-COVID, wherein we were providing Chromebooks to each of our students to give them that responsibility. We started in the 7th grade to see how it would go, and we gave each 7th grader a Chromebook to see, if they would be able to take care of it, and to allow them to have that extra added kind of baseline for access to technology, both inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so that ended up working out extremely well. And so we're starting this year off with our 6th through 9th graders are each getting a Chromebook so that we will have a level playing field. Everyone will have the same access to technology because, of course, in Los Angeles, we are starting virtually. So that's just one of the ways in which we are kind of adapting to this new change in a way that I think will be beneficial, broad stroke. Additionally, we are incorporating a speaker series. We're calling it the Lunch and Learn series. So we're going to have speakers from all over the country, all over the world, come and speak to our students. And this is a really unique opportunity because, everyone is so now used to and practiced with using Zoom and different meeting tools like this, that it's really able to connect us to people, from all over the world. This meeting is a great example of that. So our students now have the opportunity to hear from people who definitely, otherwise they would not. So I think that in many ways, it's kind of forcing us to explore these new opportunities in an exciting way.
Victoria, you said everybody's going to get a Chromebook. Will every student at their home have access to the internet?
Yes, every student at their home has access to the internet. Like I said, we're a private school. We're in a pretty affluent area. And so we can count on that in one way or another, which is fortunate for our students.
One of the reasons I asked that question is that all the students at Hope had Chromebooks. for their classes starting in the middle of March, but access to the internet was a real problem for a lot of our students at Hope High School. And as we look back on the experience from the middle of March through the end of the school year, I would think most teachers would say that we missed a lot, and that there were some students who really didn't have an equal opportunity as other students at Hope or at other schools. So access to the internet is a big issue at Hope High School in the fall. Kathy, what about you?
Yes, well, this has been interesting. Being in Europe, we had some of the first cases with Italy and all coming down with COVID. So by March 19th, all of our schools were closed down. And so we had an opportunity to really start looking at how do we want to restructure schools. So I love your phrase about the respond, reset, and renew. This has really given us an opportunity to think about what's the best way to educate kids. And so from a standpoint of, yes, we had to close down. Yes, we had to figure something else. We have been ready for over 10 years with virtual education programs that we had been starting. And we always thought it was going to be for more like things like wars and opportunities where schools might have to close down because they just could not get to their schools for more of those kinds of reasons. I took this job in Eastern Europe thinking, oh, you know, I've got Prague, I've got Vienna, you know, these are just great places. There's no problems in these places, but I've also got Russia. So Russia and Kosovo and the Ukraine. So we've been thinking before this always about how do we educate kids in case we had to close the schools for other reasons. So with that being in place, we then had to move into an opportunity of thinking about what's the best education for kids? How can we provide this for our students? And so we went into virtual education right away, and most of our schools stayed closed all spring. A few of our schools had to open up because of state regulations or country regulations that said you have to open. But all of our schools are now preparing to open. In fact, many of them are opening this week and next week. And they're going to be opening at least with most of the kids on campus. They've set up good social distancing. They've set up classrooms as such in bubbles so that they have an opportunity to keep kids contained. I was talking with a group today. They're going to have classes outside so that kids have good ventilation. We have one of the best environmentally friendly schools in Zagreb, and yet the ventilation system is terrible for COVID. It is just going to circulate the air across all the pods. So we can't even turn on the air conditioning in the schools, and we're running, it's 30, 31 degrees here, which centigrade, which is, close to 100.
Wow.
So we're definitely having to learn, and we're prepared. Most of the schools are bringing in their primary kids, and they're bringing in their 11th and 12th graders, but they're going to let the kids in 2nd grade through 10th grade rotate and come in about 2.5 days a week so that we have the chance to social distance and keep things together. But I think as difficult as it is, we are really thinking about how does our education work best for kids. And many of our children, I would say more of the older children, are enjoying working from home. But our younger kids are struggling and their parents are struggling. And so getting kids back to school is totally dependent upon the country. And as a regional education organization, our main purpose to make sure that people can come back to school safely. So there's a lot of temperature checking, sending kids home if they've got potential problems or issues that we can identify, and keeping kids apart, which is going to be a challenge.
For sure. Kathy, thank you. Sam, I'm very interested in your response. Your student demographic is very similar to mine at Hope High School, but the internship program it sounds like a very, very important part of the experience at the Met. So I imagine not only you have to manage what's going on in your school, but also manage that important relationship with the business community and what's going on in their facilities, and where so many of them are not are working virtual. I'm really curious on how that's going to be working for you in the fall. So having said that, I'm really interested in what you have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, that is something that we are exploring right now. As far as how we approached it in March, so most of our students, since I've worked at the Met, have had Chromebooks that they take with them. Given that many students don't have computers at home, we provide them with Chromebooks that they can take home, and basically when they graduate, that's their Chromebook. And so they use that. One other thing that we do is that I connect my students to Google Classroom, which is a wonderful platform to host work, quizzes, and so on and so forth. So for us, the moving to working at home wasn't as bad as it could have been, because they're used to working on an asynchronous platform, like working at home and turning in work at home on Google Classroom. Some of the difficulties that we did face were for students that didn't have internet. We formed a partnership with the telecommunications company Cox Communications here in Rhode Island, and they were able to provide hotspots for students that did not have internet. So that really worked well for us. There was a little delay, but for the most part, our students, or at least my students, were able to access internet at some level. Going back to your question about internships, we really try to think outside the box. Whether it was for me in connecting my students to interviews over Zoom, or conducting internships over Zoom was one. And some businesses were able to host students, particularly in workshops and places where there wouldn't be too much interaction. I have several internship connections that would still be willing to, but there are some places like daycares that might not be available, who knows, in the next year. So we're still kind of seeing what's going to be moving forward. But yeah, it's definitely, we're kind of seeing what we can do, what's possible, given the situation here. I also like to mention that for us, we don't know, as you may already know, in Rhode Island, we're not sure if we're going to go back. We have 4 different plans that are possible, ranging from fully open to distance learning again at home. So we're kind of waiting on our governor to announce that next week.
Yeah, I've heard that same conversation. Before I ask Victoria, Sam, and Kathy my next question, there's somebody in the audience named Nick DeCesare. I'm just wondering if Nick is listening, and I could ask Nick a question, because Nick has one of his children going to a school in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, which is one of the, if not the best school system. And their plan, I think, is pretty interesting, and we can compare that to what Victoria, Kathy, and Sam's plan is. So, Nick, are you listening? I guess not. Well, I'll come back to that later. Let me go to my...
I'm here, Steve.
You are, Nick. God bless America. Thank you very much. Nick, would you tell the audience what's happening, what the plan is in East Greenwich? Because I am impressed with that. And I think it's something, it's food for thought for everybody here. Would you please explain that?
Sure. We're doing a hybrid plan right now. Obviously, things change pretty quickly with everything going on, but it's right now there's a hybrid plan where Mondays are asynchronous learning. So online, basically what I'm expecting to happen is my daughter, who will be a junior, receives an email from each of her teachers early in the morning with an assignment that's due by the end of the day. That'll be on Mondays. Then, depending on where she falls, either Tuesday and Wednesday, or either Tuesday and Thursday, or Wednesday and Friday, she'll actually be going into the school for a full day of classes. right now it's full day. I'm wondering if they're going to maybe change it to like shorter periods. And then the opposite days, it'll be online synchronous learning, where if there's a 10 o'clock math class, she'll be online in a Zoom call with her entire class and the teacher for math at 10 o'clock. I overheard one of your speakers talking about Chromebooks for students.
Yes.
2 years ago or 3 years ago. I can't remember. So my daughter is the youngest of all the kids going to school. So, but about 2 or 3 years ago, I'm trying to remember, they issued Chromebooks to all of the high school students in our town. So every student has a Chromebook. I'll speak candidly. I was a little disappointed at the beginning of when everything happened in March that we didn't have a better system in place for synchronous learning. But I like the plan that they've developed now. I understand wanting to keep the students not throughout the school all day long. Our town is pretty fortunate. Rhode Island has been doing pretty good. We've only had since March 105 cases, I think, in East Greenwich. That's total. So I think right now there's maybe like 8 or 9 active cases in our town. So I think, we're all feeling somewhat safe here about that, but who knows what could happen. So I like the plan so far. We'll see how things change. Like I said, everything's kind of changing kind of day by day. So.
Nick, thanks a lot. Just so you know, I know everybody has a Chromebook at East Greenwich, as Nick said. Everybody has access to the internet. So they're not having the same kind of issues, obviously, that we're having at Hope and probably at the Met as well. My next question will be to all four. And Nick, I'd like you to give us some feedback on this and really open it up to everybody. I see this as a seminal moment in education right now. I see huge lessons to learn from what we're going through this. If you look what's happening in the marketplace and how much virtual employment there is right now, how many employers who are thinking about, really, do I need to bring everybody back to my building that I've been renting for all these years? And we're more effective by working at home, and the pool of talent I have access to is much greater by working virtual, on and on and on. So since we're using a lot of this now in our schools, what lessons can we learn to really have a very positive impact on the educations we're offering our students going forward? Once post-COVID, whenever that happens, if there ever is a post-COVID, what lessons can we learn to really refine the way we're educating our students today? And I'd like to go back to the same 3 people and then open it up to the rest of you. Your ideas might be. And Victoria, if you could start, what changes you could possibly envision that really will refine the way we're teaching our children when we get to the other side of this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest advantages to things like this is the connectivity that it provides to, other opportunities throughout the world. And so I think that this situation really does provide a global platform in a way that was kind of not utilized well before. We had all this material and all this technology, but nobody was really used to it and things like that. And like Sam was saying, we also have been taking advantage of using Google Classroom and as well as different apps and things like Flipgrid, which has been a really useful one for our students. And so I think that having the understanding and the acceptance that so much of these children's lives, these students' lives, takes place over the internet, over the computer, now as a school system, as a global school system, we can start to kind of take advantage of that and look at the ways in which we can actually take the students' knowledge of the internet and of the accessibility of technology and really put that towards creating a more cohesive environment and making, taking advantage of that in successful ways.
Victoria, beyond the technology, are there different skills that
Yeah.
you think that educators could focus on developing more than we have in the past as a result of what we're experiencing right now?
Well, so I think that right now, something that we are seeing in our younger students, but also our high school students, is the importance of keeping structure. And I think that parents are seeing that. I think that adults are seeing that. I think that students are really seeing that in such an environment where there's so much asynchronous learning happening. I think it's very important to continue keeping schedule and to continue keeping rigorous routine involved. And when you think about, what any given student on a normal non-COVID day goes through, they have a very specific routine every day. And so the disruption in that is kind of forcing students to be a lot more autonomous in a lot of ways than we necessarily had prepared them for, and then I think that we were expecting. So I think that that's something that definitely, could be focused on, and just the rigorous kind of organization that pulling something like this off takes. We had our tech team look into the number of emails that the students were getting, and in the first week of e-learning, the amount of emails the students were getting jumped 350%. And nobody was really prepared, students, parents, teachers, staff, to be able to really look through and synthesize all of the information that was coming at them. So, I think that the switch to e-learning has really emphasized some of the ways in which, some of the more well-being type learning that needs to be taking place, and in teaching the kids and the students how to really be independent learners in this new world.
All right, Victoria, thank you very much. Kathy, what about you over in Eastern Europe? Any new skills that you folks are focusing on? And if I could just preface that, Tino and I had a very interesting conversation about 4 years ago about education. And Tino came to me one day and said, Steve, you may think that Singapore and Hong Kong have the best education systems in the world, but the people that I'm speaking to in those two countries are complaining, and that they really don't think the school systems over there do a very good job teaching how to be creative thinkers. So I know that's been a real focus of Singapore and China. So again, I'm looking for, are there different skills that we should be teaching now to enable these students to be more competitive in this global marketplace? So Kathy, if you could respond to that.
Well, I've got a lot of different thoughts I could go, different directions I could go with this, but I think one of the most important things that I'm seeing in conversations with people is that we have a great opportunity to educate parents to become our real partners. And we have had many, many years where it looks like parents drop their children off at the school, pick them up in the afternoon, they might help them with homework, but there's a real disconnect in terms of being learning partners together with the child. So helping our kids become independent learners, helping them be autonomous with their groups, and really having a choice and voice in what they're learning. I think that becomes critical in this kind of environment, because teachers cannot just be teaching what they think the curriculum is. It's really going to be much more critical thinking opportunities. And we've got a big advantage in our programs because we do have this International Baccalaureate program, which has from beginning levels, our PYP, the primary years program, teaches kids about being inquisitive and curious and that kind of thing. So we've got a step ahead, I think, in some cases. But if we can take that opportunity to really educate parents, I think that's going to be important. And then the other thing is that I think we're all now needing to pay attention much more to personal relationships. It's so difficult to get that interconnectivity when we can see each other, we can kind of interact with each other, but we don't really have a personal relationship with each other when we're in separate entities or separate places. So being aware of children and staff about where they are. Today I had a call with some of our directors, and I could tell there was something wrong with one of them, and all I did was ask a question: how are you? how are you doing right now? And this wonderful man, he didn't burst into tears, but he teared up. And the reality was that his wife had gone with his son to another country, and they are not able to get back to the country that they're working in. And for him, that's a real blow to not be able to have his family with him when that's how they've lived for all their lives. So I could tell there was an emotional thing that was going on with him. And for us to be able to be with each other, we're going to have to pay attention. The other thing is that helping kids take the leadership. I mentioned this, I think, in our small group conversation, but one of my friend's daughter's 7 years old. And during their break time, during their learning, she runs a Zumba class. So she calls up and dials up her friends that are in her little clique or whatever. And, you know, she's running Zumba or she's running yoga one day. And this is a 7-year-old that knows how to call each other up and say, okay, this is what we're doing today. And they get the screens all set up and they're, you know, exercising and everybody's following along. And so I think we just have to let the kids lead us.
Good. Well, thank you. Of the things that you've just mentioned, one that resonates with me the most is I'm going to do a better job of getting the families of my students involved in my program and really educate them on what the mission is, what important part they play in this, and then coming up with a schedule for their engagement that suits their needs and not so much the schools.
We're doing, many of our schools are doing weekly town halls or monthly town halls. For our collaboration, we always were proud of the fact that we had groups get together once or twice a year. Now my directors are meeting once a week. My business managers are meeting once a week. All of the different groups are setting up their own schedules, and there's probably more collaboration and support for each other in developing our programs than there ever was before. So
impressive.
That's a big plus.
Good job. Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate that. Sam, what about you?
I think there are a number of different things that, skills that I think my students are developing. I think one huge one is technical or technological etiquette. And so how to use these platforms. They have so many platforms out there, whether that's social media or more professional ones like Zoom, at their fingertips, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so getting to teach them how to use these platforms professionally and how to really present themselves professionally on these platforms. Our students, when they're at the Met, they don't have grades. They present what they've learned at the end of the trimester, and so over PowerPoint. And so at the end of our last trimester, our students had to come up with a presentation on through Google Sites and Flipgrid and some other platforms in order to present. They recorded themselves and then they presented it to a group about 30 people, and then they had to answer questions about what they learned, what work was missing. And so I think this is just a great time for students to develop the skills that they might have been weak on, but really preparing them for the professional world, preparing them for college, where they will be increasingly getting to do these things, to give presentations and do them well. I saw someone, I think it was Catherine, mention something that I think also needs to probably be addressed. You know, I serve a community of immigrant population, and one of the things that it can be difficult is that students, you know, we're trying to give them time to have a schedule, to come up with a routine, but oftentimes if they have to help their parents, perhaps go to the office to translate for them. Myself being a first-generation American, I had to translate for my mom. I had to go to offices and do things like that. And so I think for us as teachers, we had to really be creative of how we met with our students. And so I have 16 students, and so I had to come up with time. I scheduled time to meet with them one-on-one, at least once or twice a week. depending on what times they were going to be available. If they knew that their mom was going to go to an appointment, we would talk about it, we would text or what have you, so that we could stay, we could check in, we could stay on the same base. But it, necessity creates creativity. And so I think that's what we've been, myself, as well as the students have been, we've been learning.
That's great, Sam. Thanks. Just want to get Nick's input this last time. And I think Nick's input could be very interesting. Nick has a senior at NYU who is preparing for the workforce right now, just getting ready to get her applications out there. She's had some internships in the city that have been affected by COVID. And then also Nick, as he said before, has a junior in high school. So Nick, as your oldest daughter is telling you what her competition for getting a job in the marketplace and the skills that she is telling you she needs to be competitive, are there some things you're hoping that your school system will focus on post-COVID to really, again, make all children more competitive for the jobs they're looking for in the marketplace?
Well, I think, that topic is all the time, anytime, post-COVID, pre-COVID, it's what the training is and how they're preparing themselves and how the schools are helping them to prepare for that. I mean, we have always, since they're little, always been very active in their education, and I know that that's not always something that any parent can do, but we've been fortunate to be able to do that. In this case, where we are fortunate, at least I'm fortunate enough to work from home, so I can be here to help the kids with homework. Throughout just until recently, my wife was home as well. She just went back to the office, and she just started working. So she's been home with the kids until about a year ago when, we have 2 kids in college and one about to, so she had to go back. It's just one of those things. But, as far as what I'm hoping for coming out of all this, you talked earlier about like what kind of changes can be made and what can happen in the future. We've had different experiences with the kids. My oldest daughter has had no problem with the virtual learning. NYU has done an excellent job with that. My son did have a problem with it. He goes to Johnson & Wales. It was a little tougher for him, but he's a different kind of learner. We just found out that Johnson & Wales is going full virtual, so he's opted to take a gap semester right now, depending on what happens, possibly a year. But he signed up, or we offered, and he agreed, loves the idea, can't wait for an outward bound program. So we're looking for different options for them to gain skills, whether it's leadership skills, educational skills, whatever, to help them. And then with my daughter, she just actually sat down next to me and said they just found out that school is delayed 2 weeks in Rhode Island. So that's news to me. We'll have to prepare for that and be ready for that, for her going back a little bit later. Again, me working at home and her being older, it doesn't affect us as much. I don't know how families are doing it with a bunch of little kids. That is a big challenge. So we've been kind of blessed, somewhat fortunate in all of this. We're all healthy and managing all this well. But I can see all the conflicts and issues and what can come up with all this, and just hope that things get better soon.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. I'd like to open it up to the rest of the group. I know there have been a number of people putting in some information in the chat box here, but if I could just, there's so much to go over, just open it up for any comments, any questions, any suggestions that anybody who's listening right now would like to offer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That is Keela. Kelia?
Yes. Yep.
Kelia.
Hi. So my name is Kelia Kenter. I am an educational facilities planner. So not an educator, but I work with a lot of educators. And one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of people discussing is the opportunity to move to flipped classroom pedagogy. And for a multitude of reasons. One is that it better supports project-based learning. So long-term, even when COVID is no longer a thing, the flipped classroom, and I don't know if there are people on here who are not familiar with that concept, but just the idea that instead of having the stand and deliver portion of education where the teacher's lecturing happen in the school, in the classroom, having that portion happen at home. Well, when you're at school, it's the hands-on component and the actual working through problems in the classroom. So that long-term supports project-based learning, but short-term, it's much more adaptable to remote learning. So if a school needs to shut down for a number of weeks, it's an easier transition for the students they're already used to receiving their lecture online or reading through it or what have you. And it also provides the teacher, when they are in the classroom with the student, more opportunities for that personal connection that Kathy had mentioned is just so critical right now.
Kelia, do you see all school systems throughout the state, our state, having the ability to do what you just described? Or are there some school systems, obviously, with some of the advantages they presently have, it's an easy transition for them?
Absolutely, it's easier for some than others. One of the things that I'm seeing locally, so I work with Rhode Island schools, but I live in New York State in a rather rural area, and our school district has been forming some private partnerships to help get internet access to those families that don't currently have it for free. For their students. So they've been partnering with some nonprofits as well as the local cable company to get families connected.
Are you talking to anybody in Providence right now?
I have a client right now with Eric Army. We're working on a charter school in Providence, but we were retained by them for a different project. And we just happen to be around for all this COVID stuff. It's very hard from a facilities perspective to be responsive in such quick time, especially with limited budgets. So at this point, a lot of the schools' budgets are going more to personnel and technology rather than physical improvements. I mean, there are some such as windows and ventilation, and for districts that have the budget, improving outdoor classrooms. But for a lot of districts, it's really getting more access to technology and more teachers so that they can separate students more.
Great. Thank you, Kelia. I appreciate it. Anybody else? Any suggestions, questions? Well, let me go directly at some of. Oh, yes, Tino. I wanted to ask Laura a question too. When Laura was talking about her back, I'm sorry. Yeah, Laura, talking about your background, some of the things you've been doing. I was wondering, as you hear all this, especially the plight of what's going on in the inner city, which is my major concern. Do you have any suggestions for us to be thinking about to really change the way we're educating our students in the inner city and teaching them the critical skills that they need to be more competitive in the marketplace?
Sure. So, it's a quite an extensive answer I could give you to that one. But I think the first thing to do is to always keep in mind that we should be taking into account those circumstances, whether it's high poverty, internet access, parents who don't have the abilities or the time to be serving as teachers at home. And again, that broadens up the conversation, but it also broadens up our opportunity to think of new ways to kind of do this. That's why I tossed in some comments about internet access and broadband being an issue that even carried down into our early childhood conversation with the governors yesterday, because recognizing that sort of equity, access, poverty factors. With specific focus on the skills, it's very interesting because again, that is where I set out actually to look at a way of framing the importance of, in my case, investing in early childhood. I always say it's not that I'm just interested or focused on young children, but I'm an upstream sort of innovation person, right? Root cause. And I kept going earlier and earlier. But I also am somebody who's done a lot of work in communications. How do I translate the message to people so they don't roll their eyes and think I'm boring? And so that is where I realized that it's a skills discussion, right? And partly because I recognized I was focusing on how do we especially target highest poverty, most at-risk children whose life trajectories were all but set in stone, right? And the idea that nobody in the US is or should be comfortable with the fact that you can almost predict a child's future life outcomes by their zip code. And the skills discussion is a very interesting one, because when I say that laundry list that I said earlier on, I can say that in a group of Fortune 500 CEOs. I can give a presentation at the World Bank or the US Chamber of Commerce, and it resonates. At the same time, it's obviously in the sort of the mandate of higher ed to be preparing kids for those skills, which means it's in the mandate of the K-12 education system to tunnel it, but you just carry that backwards. So I thought, what if we could have a shared language and understanding of what those skills are and why they're important? And I did put in here, again, I really am terrible, I hate doing self-promotion, but I did put my link to the TED Talk I gave in Northern India in TEDx Chandigarh, the link there, only because what I almost, I was pleasantly surprised that I thought if I could come up with a framework of not only skills, let's make it really simple for people so we're all talking the same language, whether you're early childhood, K-12, higher ed, healthcare, business, whatever. Say we all agree they're important, let's look at where they have their development, and then say, okay, and why are they? And what you find is that, and it's defined, even the World Economic Forum defines those skills, a third of those skills are what I called IQ skills, but the traditional reading, writing, arithmetic-like skills. But I think Kathy and maybe, Sam and Victoria, but people have mentioned it multiple times, but there's these 2/3 of those skills that are other skills, which people typically resort to calling soft, non-cognitive, other skills. And what I'm finding, and I think it's for whether it's inner city, high poverty, or just the challenges of the pandemic, what we're seeing is in a rapidly changing world, right? That's globally connected and complex, that all of a sudden you have to think about what skills become much more important. It's not knowing the right answer, it's asking good questions. Somebody started out early on questioning. That's where I think if you look 2/3 of those skills being the other skills, and that is what I address in my TED Talk, we talk about them, but we don't always pursue them. The idea of flip the classroom that was just mentioned is an example where it's instead of just giving you set content knowledge, it's more of a thought process and engagement and a relationships and collaboration sort of mentality. Those are the skills that I think are going to help all kids, but especially the kids who are going to have to kind of go it alone a little bit more, don't have all the resources, succeed in today's world. So hopefully that's what you were looking for. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
No, I just want one more question. I have juniors that I teach at Hope High School. If you were going to make a recommendation to me to prioritize 5 of those skills that you're talking about, what are those 5 skills that I should be focusing on introducing and developing next year in my class?
Well, I would suggest that if you allowed me 7, that is the framework I created to simplify it. So there are 7.
No, you can only have 5. I'm sorry.
Only 5. I think that concept, again, it's always mentioned in education discussions for like the group like this, that's really kind of thinking about this strategically. One is the lifelong learning types of skills, right? So the picking a passion, applying that, learning all sorts of skills related to that passion, because that pulls in engagement and motivation and curiosity and things. That's a big one. I would suggest that the ability to be adaptable, which clearly the pandemic is making clear, human nature does not make us very comfortable with being adaptable, right? We want the answer, we want it in a nice canned package, and why did you tell me something else yesterday or last week doesn't sit well with people. But the world is changing quickly, whether because of technology or because of COVID. And so that idea of, and again, it fits in with the sort of design thinking, sort of rapid prototyping, that ties in with the failures, right? That the idea of getting comfortable with failure and learning from it, I think helps students, especially at that age where, and again, I've got a 20, a 22, and a 23-year-old. I've been through virtual college graduations. I've been through all these things. But this idea of it opens people up for criticism, for realizing there's some other ways of doing things, to overcome challenges. And again, I'm not going to be able to give you off the top of my head the packaged 5, but that's that ability to fail and adapt, which I called wobble skills, right? Like weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Not massive failure, right? Or as a pediatrician, not ride your bike down a hill with no helmet, barefoot in the middle of the street. But ability to fail and adapt and adjust and all is really important for skills, because I've talked to Fortune 100 CEOs who've said to me, that's the skill we care about most. Great, I get a pile of resumes on my desk for all of the things you've accomplished and done, but what are you going to do the first time you fail? Because you will fail. And this generation doesn't have that skill. So that would be another one that comes immediately to mind.
Laura, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I'll have to check out that TED Talk, really. You got me curious about it already. Tino, you were going to mention something before I rudely interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So, Laura, that was fantastic. And I'll take a just short meander, and then I'll ask my question. 'Cause the last set of events that Giant Shoulders created was called Failure by Design, and it was all about exploring failure. And the best question I got in that forum, and it was a couple of agency owners come on stage, and someone in the audience asked, "I'm a client. How can I be a better client?" So I'm going to use the same kind of framework to ask the panelists. It's like, and I know that there are a lot of parents in the mix. My kid is way too young to go to school. But I'm asking on behalf of the parents, how can we be better parents during this time? Because I know that a lot of us are being pulled for work because we're at home, the kids are at home, and we want to be involved, but we don't have the framework. We have outsourced education for so long. So how can we be better parents during this time, and how can we help our kids, and also you guys as educators, how can we help you?
Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I could.
Sam?
All 3 of us.
Sam, do you want to go first?
Yes, I think it was what Victoria had mentioned earlier in our talk, is just providing a routine.
Yeah.
I think a routine works wonders. Students need structure, kids need structure, and so having a time when they know what time they're going to bed, right? What time they're going to wake up, and even just, I mean, I'm looking at the schedule that we have for if we go to a virtual to distance learning this fall. I mean, we put in time for exercise. We put in time for lunch to connect with someone. So these are like suggestions that we put into our schedule for our students to engage in. And we also even put in things like something creative, like a creative time from 1:30 to 2 o'clock. These type of structures not only work for them to get their work done, but also just to be lets them be a whole person. It's a holistic look. And so I think what parents can do is definitely, if you can set an example of a routine for students to work in, it would work wonders for us.
Victoria, I'm going to ask you to reinforce that, but before I do, I'm in touch with a lot of students who graduate from Hope, especially those going to college. And one of the things that almost every student tells me is that I was not prepared to manage time in college the way I'm forced to do in order to be successful. So when you were speaking about rigor and accountability and things like that, that's one of the first things that I was thinking about, is how do we teach kids to manage time and prioritize what's important and then dedicate enough time to those. If you want to just reinforce that now, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to piggyback off of what Sam was saying and what you were just talking about, I think that a lot of times when we use kind of the vernacular of you know, parents becoming learning coaches and, you know, partners in teaching and things like that, it can kind of scare people off. But really what we mean primarily is just setting the example by what behavior they're presenting. So we understand that everyone, almost everyone is also working from home right now. And, it's definitely tempting to just kind of let yourself slip into going to bed late, to, not getting dressed in the morning, things like that. But the importance of understanding that these kids, because they are kids, even the high schoolers who are about to go off to college, they're still in the midst of learning these skills, and keeping things like, a normal breakfast before class, not letting your children like eat lunch while, the teachers are talking, things that they wouldn't normally be doing in school, keeping that kind of rigor in the same way. And so, keeping things to a schedule. These students are, even the most autonomous students, parents aren't used to maybe supervising homework or things like that. So they think that carries on into the school day. But when you think about what that means, supervising homework or not needing to supervise homework is a 2 or 3 hour chunk of time in the evening where everything is prescribed. And so even those students that can be really autonomous and really independent during normal school times need a little bit more structure and just a little bit more modeling of good behavior. And in addition to that, I think one of the most important things, and I understand that this can be a challenge depending on your housing situation and depending on your family situation and work situation, but just providing a quiet, clean space, for the child to participate in these online classes and to do their work, even if that's, just a corner of the dining room table or something. The understanding, the recognition, and the respect of what these children are doing, trying to learn, and the understanding that this is just very difficult for them. This is not an ideal learning environment for, the vast majority of students. And so really emphasizing the fact that they are doing something difficult and they need the respect of a small little corner of the room to really be able to focus on themselves and their studies.
Thanks, Victoria. Kathy, any Eastern European insights that you could add to that, please?
Well, actually, I think one of the things that I very much value, I've been over here now for 9 years, and one of the things that is so lovely about Europe is that it's multi-generational. Houses are designed to have parents and grandparents living together or nearby. And the point that I want to make about this is that this is our opportunity to think about our communities and our families. And there are more than just the parents that can help kids with their learning. Grandparents can help little kids. My one friend is working on this whole concept of how to educate grandparents to be Zoom coaches for their grandchildren, and doing this thing called language dancing, reading books to them on a regular basis. They've got, in the kids' schedule is the noon lunch hour and story time with grandma or grandpa. And I think having that broader sense of community and how can we do this together, because this isn't going to go away. This is definitely something that we have to be creative about and really understand that this is a struggle. I mean, I'm a teacher, so teaching at home was not a problem. But my friends that are not teachers, they're like, they're going nuts. This is stressful for them, and I get that. So how do we think engaging others in our community, whether it's a teenage friend down the street that can help with tutoring, if it's a parent down the street or a person down the street that's a friend that's not got any kids. There's lots of people that we can engage in this. And then the other thing is that I think we really need to, again, go back to what I was thinking, or I mentioned earlier, is that we really have to pay attention to people and their emotional states around this and help people as they're dealing with this, because this is a struggle.
Thanks, Kathy. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Things to consider. Who is that? Chris?
Chris, yes.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, everyone. So I work for HMH as a digital product owner for our reading intervention software. And something I've noticed professionally, as well as in this conversation, is that the conversation tends to be dominated by how we can help the student. what I want to know is, what have you done for your teachers, and how can we help your teachers?
Okay. So you don't have an answer to that question, Chris. You're looking for our feedback on that, correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
All right. Any Victoria, Kathy, Sam, you want to take a shot at that?
I think, as Kathy had mentioned, I think we do need to look after our teachers and their social emotional states. I think many other educators would agree that last year was probably the toughest year that I've had teaching. And I think we, even in this upcoming year, are asked to do more than what teachers sign up to do. And I think here in America, without getting too political, we're asked to, in some cases, sacrifice ourselves, right? Or we wear many hats. And so I think reaching out to teachers, making sure that they are okay, making sure that there is room for teachers if they need to step away. And I was thankful that even during the latter half of the year, we had professional days or just days where it was a mental health day. And I'm glad that I'm able to take that, because I don't think we speak about that enough. And in a time when we're in our houses, many times we're asked to meet at odd hours of the day. And most likely we're going to be working a longer day than we naturally would if we were at school. When you're at school, you close your laptop, you put your things away, and then you leave. And you may work on some things at home, but that's your prerogative. But when you're at home, it's your space, right? And so I mean, I know many of us have offices or whatnot, but just that mental toll that it takes can wear us down. And so maybe making available telehealth,
Sure.
There's many options, but that I wanted to mention that for sure.
Chris, I'd like to take a shot at that. And I don't think we celebrate and exploit excellence enough in teaching. I know in the school where I teach, there are some teachers doing some remarkable things over the years under some very difficult circumstances. And I think too few people know about that in the school and in the community. And I think some of these excellent teachers that we have can teach others and parents valuable lessons on how we can refine our education to our students, enhance that education. So I think we need to celebrate excellence more. And then finally, I think we should reward these excellent teachers in something that they feel is rewarding, whether it's financial or something else that they feel are really being appreciated.
I was going to say that one of the things that that my job is to provide professional development for our schools. And so we're looking at balancing how do we bring in virtually, like we're going to have John Bates come and help us here in September, for teachers to learn a little bit more about how to be better speakers in this kind of environment and how to understand their unique contributions to the learning of students and the learning of their peers. And so I have to look always at my programs to say, how am I going to give them some skills and concepts that they will be better at delivery of curriculum online? And also, how do we help build the community? So, you know, we do a lot with community building, having primary teachers get online with other primary teachers and share what is it that they're having success with, what's worked, what's not worked, how do they support each other, science teachers supporting each other, counselors supporting each other. So I'm just thrilled about how our teachers have embraced, even though it was like one more meeting, it's finding that connection for them to get online with people that they actually value that opportunity to learn from and learn together. So we're looking on multiple levels, trying to figure out how to support teachers because this is tough.
Okay. Chris, does that help?
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you all for your insights.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? All right, Tino, I think that's it. I think we've run out of gas and we're ready to move on.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Kathy, for joining us. And also, Laura, and I know Willa had to pop off a little bit early. So thank you all for your insights and all the questions. So typically, what we do is that after this call, we do send up we do send out an email, and if any of the speakers have any links that they want to share, please send it over to us so that we can include it in the email. So Mike, do you want to just put up the last couple of slides, and then we'll wrap up and then we can go our separate ways? All right. Good.
Technical difficulties. May want to start without me.
Yeah, that's all right. So this month for us is focusing on education. So I know that Willa and Laura are going to have almost the part 2 of a lot of this this conversation that we started here tomorrow. So I do absolutely encourage everybody to sign up. I signed up already during the call for the premiere, and also I'm really looking forward to the panel of experts. So like I mentioned, this month is it's a month of education. So we broke up a conversation into 2 parts, and I know that we have a lot to cover even in just this call with primary and secondary education. The next conversation is all about higher ed. I think at least in the U.S. With the fall semester coming, starting soon, there's definitely a lot of questions, and I think a lot of it has to do with value as well. How and why a school is still charging the same amount for what is perceived as a sort of second-rate experience online. So it's definitely interesting. I think a lot of the conversations that we have been having it's not new, but it's definitely been compounded by COVID. And so now that it's becoming more and more urgent to have the conversation, even the ones that we're having today around, well, a lot of the problems might have already been existing, has just been just compounded by this time. What can we do about it? And we have to react faster than ever. So we're going to extend that to our next conversation in August 25th about higher ed. We will have another panel of experts, and we'll have that discussion around what can we do as educators, as as business people who are going to be hiring some of these students, and even just as we're talking about this, with Laura mentioning a couple of things around how we need to better equip students with skill and how important it is to start early. We're going to zoom into college and really being the last step before the job market. What are they doing? What can we do during this moment? So with that said, the last thing I'm gonna mention is that, and I forgot to mention that in the beginning of this call, is that all our proceeds on with every one of these events go to a charity that that is connected to one of our speakers. So today's proceeds is going to Steve's class that he's teaching at Hope High School. So I just want to kind of give a shout out, and I don't know if Steve, you want to say any more about the class and where the money goes towards.
Sure. A few things. I send students each summer to the National Youth Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C. It costs me about $3,000 per student. And it's a life-changing experience for our students to go to this forum where we have high school students they'll work with for 5 days from all over the world. The other thing, bus trips to different companies and colleges that we visit during the year. I buy technology for kids in need who don't have laptops and can't get them from the school, or they don't have enough money for at home. And I also print some textbooks that I've written for those students who'd rather have a hard copy book than something that's they access online. If you look at my website, there are about 7 books that I've written. There are PDFs there. And I use periods of American history to teach life skills like branding, networking, leadership, change management, etc. So that's where the money goes. Everybody makes the check out to Hope High School, attention Steve Cronin, so I get it to the life skills program and not the general fund. So if anybody has some extra money, we'd certainly appreciate it at Hope High School. I really do appreciate it. Tino, thank you very much. Much
Awesome.
appreciated.
And once again, thank you to all the panelists and everybody who joined us. Thank you for your insights, your comments, and once again, we'll send out an email. And since this is going to be recorded, we're going to be putting this online in the next few days as well. So this concludes our session today. So hopefully, I hope to see you guys in the next session. And thank you so much for joining today.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for what you do. Educators, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Awesome.
Thank you,
Kathy,
John.
thanks for staying up late.
I'm going to bed now.
Go to bed.